What happens when Hollywood royalty meets royal controversy live on television? Today we're diving into one of the most explosive moments in daytime TV history, where Angelina Jolie delivered a masterclass in grace under pressure while completely dismantling Meghan Markle's carefully crafted narrative. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and by the end, one guest was left speechless while the other earned a standing ovation. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about celebrity interviews. The View studio buzzed with anticipation as the show's iconic theme music faded. Whoopi Goldberg sat center stage, flanked by Joy Behar, Sarah Haynes, Alyssa Farah Griffin, and Sunny Hostin. The energy was different today, electric almost, as if everyone could sense something big was about to unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, Whoopi began, her voice carrying that familiar authority. We have two very special guests joining us today. First, please welcome actress, director, and humanitarian Angelina Jolie. The audience erupted as Angelina walked onto the stage, her presence commanding immediate respect. She moved with that effortless elegance that had captivated audiences for decades, offering warm waves to the crowd before taking her seat on the famous couch. And our second guest, Whoopi continued, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle. Meghan emerged from backstage, her smile bright but somehow calculated. She'd clearly prepared for this moment, her outfit perfectly chosen, her hair immaculately styled. But there was something in her eyes, a hunger perhaps, that suggested she had an agenda beyond simple promotion. As both women settled into their seats, the contrast was immediately apparent. Angelina sat naturally, genuinely present in the moment, while Meghan seemed to be performing even in stillness, her posture perfect, her hands positioned just so. So wonderful to have you both here. Joy Behar jumped in, her trademark enthusiasm on full display. Angelina, you're here promoting your new film about refugee advocacy. And Meghan, you're discussing your upcoming Netflix documentary series. Two very different projects, but both focusing on important social issues. Angelina nodded graciously. Thank you for having me. Yes, this film is something very close to my heart. I've spent years working with refugees around the world, and I wanted to create something that would give voice to their stories, their resilience. That's beautiful, Sarah Haynes interjected. Your work with the UN has been so impactful over the years. I've been privileged to witness incredible strength in the most challenging circumstances, Angelina replied. These are people who've lost everything but refuse to lose hope. They've taught me more about courage than any role I've ever played. Meghan, who had been waiting for her moment, leaned forward slightly. I completely understand that passion for humanitarian work. My own journey has opened my eyes to so many injustices, particularly around mental health and women's empowerment. Sometimes I think people don't realize how isolating it can be when you're trying to use your platform for change but facing constant criticism. There it was. Even in what should have been Angelina's moment, Meghan had somehow redirected the conversation to her own struggles. The panel exchanged quick glances, and viewers at home could practically feel the shift in energy. Sunny Hostin, ever the skilled interviewer, tried to navigate diplomatically. Both of your platforms have certainly brought attention to important causes. Meghan, tell us about your Netflix series. Well, Meghan began, settling back with visible satisfaction. It's really about authenticity and breaking free from systems that try to silence you. I think so many women, especially women of color, can relate to feeling trapped by institutions that smile at you publicly but undermine you privately. The statement hung in the air. Everyone knew exactly what institution she was referencing, and the implication was clear. This wasn't just promotion, this was a calculated attack. Alyssa Farah Griffin, drawing on her political background, recognized the moment for what it was. That's certainly a powerful theme. Angelina, in your humanitarian work, have you encountered similar institutional challenges? Angelina's response was measured, thoughtful. I've learned that real change happens when you focus on the work itself rather than the obstacles. When you're genuinely committed to a cause, you find ways to serve regardless of the circumstances. The people I work with, refugees who fled war zones, they don't have the luxury of institutional support. They create their own networks of resilience. It was a subtle but pointed response. Without directly confronting Meghan, Angelina had highlighted the difference between genuine service and self-serving narratives. Meghan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, But I think it's important to acknowledge that some of us have had to fight battles on multiple fronts. When you're constantly having your character assassinated in the press while trying to do good work, it takes a toll. Character assassination is a strong term, Joy Behar noted, her journalist instincts kicking in. Are you referring to specific incidents? I'm referring to a pattern, Meghan replied, her voice taking on that practiced cadence she used in serious interviews. A pattern of systematic undermining that goes beyond normal media scrutiny. When you're trying to modernize ancient institutions while also fighting racial bias, the pushback can be overwhelming. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This was clearly building to something bigger. Whoopi, sensing the tension, tried to steer things back on track. Let's talk about your current projects. Angelina, your film premieres next month, correct? Yes. And I'm hoping it will encourage people to support refugee resettlement programs in their own communities. Angelina answered. Real change happens at the grassroots level, when ordinary people decide to get involved. Again, there was that subtle emphasis on action over complaint, service over self-promotion. Meghan was beginning to look less comfortable, realizing that her usual narrative techniques weren't landing the way they typically did. Meghan shifted in her seat, clearly frustrated that her attempts to center the conversation around her own victimhood weren't gaining the sympathy she expected. The View panel was experienced enough to recognize when a guest was pushing an agenda, and Angelina's presence seemed to highlight just how calculated Meghan's approach really was. You know what, Meghan said, her voice taking on a sharper edge? I think it's easy for some people to talk about grassroots change when they haven't had to deal with the kind of institutional racism and systematic silencing that I've faced. Not everyone has had the privilege of being universally beloved by the media. The comment was clearly directed at Angelina, and the studio fell completely silent. This was unprecedented territory for The View, a direct confrontation between two high-profile guests. Angelina's expression remained serene, but there was steel in her eyes now. I'm sorry, are you suggesting that my humanitarian work has been easy because of media treatment? I'm suggesting that some of us have had to fight harder for our voices to be heard, Meghan replied, doubling down. When you're dealing with palace sources briefing against you, tabloids twisting your every word, and family members refusing to defend you, it's a different kind of challenge. Sarah Haynes looked genuinely uncomfortable now. Meghan, those are some serious allegations about your time in the royal family. They're not allegations, they're facts, Meghan stated firmly. And I think it's important that people understand the difference between someone who gets to choose their humanitarian causes versus someone who is silenced when trying to speak up about mental health, about racism, about basic human dignity. The accusation was clear. Meghan was implying that Angelina's decades of humanitarian work were somehow less meaningful because she hadn't faced the same personal struggles. Whoopi Goldberg, who had moderated countless heated discussions, could see this was spiraling beyond normal interview territory. Ladies, let's take a step back here. But Angelina held up a gentle hand. No, it's all right, Whoopi. I think this is an important conversation. She turned to face Meghan directly, her voice calm but firm. I've spent 20 years working in refugee camps, war zones, and areas affected by natural disasters. I've held dying children in my arms. I've sat with mothers who've watched their families torn apart by violence. I've been threatened. I've been criticized. I've been called everything from a homewrecker to a publicity seeker. The studio was dead silent now. Even the camera operator seemed to lean in. But never once, Angelina continued, have I made my personal struggles the center of the story when discussing the suffering of others. The refugees I work with, they don't have Netflix deals to tell their stories. They don't have media platforms or royal titles or the ability to sit on television and demand sympathy. They have nothing but their resilience and their hope that someone will help them rebuild their lives. Meghan's face had gone pale. This wasn't the response she'd expected. I think you're misunderstanding. Meghan tried to recover. I never said your work wasn't important. I'm simply pointing out that different people face different obstacles, and some of us have had to overcome additional barriers. Additional barriers? Angelina repeated slowly. You mean like the barrier of being born into a war zone? The barrier of watching your village burn down? The barrier of walking hundreds of miles with small children to reach a refugee camp where you might, if you're lucky, get one meal a day? Joy Behar, who rarely found herself speechless, was watching this exchange with obvious fascination. This wasn't just a disagreement. This was a masterclass in perspective. That's not what I meant, Meghan said, her voice becoming defensive. Obviously, those situations are tragic, but I'm talking about institutional racism within powerful families, about being gaslit and isolated. You were isolated, Angelina said, her tone remaining remarkably calm. In a palace, with a staff of hundreds, with access to the best healthcare, education, and resources in the world, with a platform that reaches millions of people globally. Sunny Hostin tried to intervene. I think what Meghan is trying to express is that even with privilege, there can be unique challenges related to race and family dynamics. Of course there can be, Angelina agreed immediately, and those challenges are real and they matter. But when you're sitting on national television talking about humanitarian work, maybe the focus should be on the people who actually need help, rather than on how hard it's been for you to help them. The comment landed like a thunderbolt. Meghan's mouth opened slightly, as if she couldn't quite believe what she just heard. I can't believe you just said that, Meghan finally managed. You have no idea what I've been through. You have no idea what it's like to have an entire institution turn against you, to have your own family participate in smear campaigns, to be driven to thoughts of suicide because of the pressure. You're absolutely right, Angelina replied without missing a beat. I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to visit a refugee camp where mothers are so malnourished they can't produce milk for their babies. I know what it's like to meet teenage girls who've been sold into trafficking. I know what it's like to work with survivors of genocide who still wake up screaming every night. The comparison was devastating in its simplicity. Alyssa Farah Griffin, drawing on her years in politics, recognized a defining moment when she saw one. Angelina, how do you maintain focus on the work when dealing with personal challenges? You remember why you started, Angelina answered, her gaze still fixed on Meghan. You remember that your personal pain, no matter how real, doesn't compare to the suffering of people who have no voice, no platform, no resources. You use whatever privilege you have, whatever platform you've been given, to serve others rather than to serve yourself. Meghan's face was flushed now, her carefully constructed composure completely shattered. So you're saying that my pain doesn't matter? That speaking out about racism and mental health struggles is selfish? I'm saying that when you're discussing humanitarian work, the focus should be on the people you're trying to help, not on how hard it's been for you to help them, Angelina replied evenly. I'm saying that real service requires putting other people's needs before your own narrative. The audience was completely captivated. This wasn't just drama, this was a profound difference in worldview being played out in real time. Whoopi tried once more to regain control. Ladies, I think we're all passionate about important causes here. But Meghan wasn't finished. I think it's incredibly privileged to suggest that someone shouldn't speak about their own struggles when those struggles are directly related to their ability to help others. My story matters because it shows other women, especially women of color, that they don't have to stay silent in the face of injustice. Your story absolutely matters, Angelina agreed, surprising everyone. But so do the stories of the people you claim to be helping. And right now, in this conversation about humanitarian work, we've spent 15 minutes talking about your personal grievances and approximately 2 minutes talking about the actual people who need help. The observation hit like a perfectly aimed arrow. Meghan sat there, mouth slightly agape, as the truth of Angelina's words settled over the studio like a heavy blanket. Even the seasoned view panel seemed stunned by the precision of the critique. That's not fair, Meghan finally stammered, her voice lacking its usual confident cadence. You're trying to make it seem like I don't care about the people I'm trying to help. Am I? Angelina asked quietly. Because in the 20 minutes we've been sitting here, you've mentioned your own struggles approximately 15 times, and the people your documentary is supposed to help exactly twice. Once in passing, and once to explain how their stories relate to your own experience. Sarah Haynes looked down at her notes, clearly fact-checking Angelina's observation in real time. Her slight nod suggested the count was accurate. I think context matters, Meghan said, her voice rising slightly. People need to understand the obstacles I've faced in order to appreciate the work I'm doing now. Do they? Angelina countered, leaning forward slightly. When I make a film about refugees, do I spend the majority of the interview talking about how difficult it was for me to get financing? Do I discuss how exhausting the travel was, or how the media criticized my motives? Or do I talk about the incredible people I met and the urgent need for support? The panel exchanged glances. They all knew the answer. In countless interviews over the years, Angelina had consistently centered the people she was trying to help rather than her own journey. That's different, Meghan insisted, but her argument was losing steam. You don't understand the unique pressures of being in the royal family. You're absolutely right, I don't, Angelina agreed readily. But you know what I do understand? The pressure of being a single mother trying to protect her children while working in dangerous locations. The pressure of being constantly scrutinized for every relationship, every adoption, every parenting choice I've ever made. The pressure of having my mental health questioned, my motives analyzed, my entire life dissected in the tabloids for over 2 decades. The studio was completely silent now. Even Whoopi seemed hesitant to interrupt. But here's the difference, Angelina continued, her voice steady and clear. I learned early on that my personal struggles, no matter how real or how painful, are not the story. When I'm advocating for people who are literally fighting for survival, the story is them. Always them. Meghan's face was now visibly flushed, her composure completely abandoned. So, you think I should just stay silent about institutional racism, about the mental health crisis I experienced? I think, Angelina said, pausing deliberately, that there's a time and place for personal testimony, and there's a time and place for selfless advocacy. And I think true advocates know the difference. Joy Behar, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. Angelina, that's a pretty strong statement. Are you saying that personal experience can inform advocacy work? Not at all, Angelina replied immediately. Personal experience absolutely should inform advocacy. But the question is whether you're using your experience to serve others, or whether you're using others' suffering to serve your own narrative. The comment was devastating in its clarity. Meghan looked as if she'd been physically struck. I can't believe this, Meghan said, her voice shaking now. I came here to talk about important social issues, and instead I'm being attacked for sharing my own story of overcoming adversity. No one's attacking you, Sunny Hostin said gently, trying to diffuse the situation. I think this is just a very passionate discussion about different approaches to advocacy. But Angelina wasn't finished. Meghan, can you tell us, right now, without mentioning your own experience, why people should care about your Netflix documentary? What specific issues does it address? And how does it help the communities you're claiming to serve? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. It's about empowering women to speak their truth in the face of institutional oppression, she finally managed. Which institutions? Angelina pressed. What specific forms of oppression? What communities are being helped? What resources are being provided? What measurable outcomes are you hoping to achieve? With each question, Meghan seemed to shrink further into her seat. It was becoming painfully obvious that her project was more about her own story than about helping others. I don't think I should have to defend my humanitarian efforts to someone who's trying to minimize my experiences, Meghan said, her voice taking on a petulant tone that was completely at odds with her usual polished presentation. I'm not minimizing your experiences, Angelina replied calmly. I'm asking you to distinguish between sharing your experiences to help others and sharing other struggles to validate your own experiences. The distinction was so clear, so perfectly articulated, that even Meghan seemed to understand she'd been completely outmaneuvered. Alyssa Farah Griffin, recognizing a teaching moment, addressed the audience directly. I think what we're witnessing here is a really important conversation about the difference between advocacy and autobiography. Exactly, Angelina said, turning to face the camera. When we have platforms, when we have privilege, when we have resources, we have a choice. We can use those gifts to amplify voices that would otherwise go unheard, or we can use other people's struggles to amplify our own voices. Meghan sat in stunned silence, clearly realizing that everything she'd said had been turned against her with surgical precision. Whoopi, sensing that this had reached its natural conclusion, tried to wrap up. Well, this has certainly been an enlightening discussion about the responsibilities that come with public platform. It has, Angelina agreed, then turned directly to Meghan one final time. And I hope that your documentary succeeds in helping the people it's supposed to serve. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. The comment was gracious on the surface, but carried an unmistakable challenge. Meghan managed a weak smile and a barely audible thank you, but it was clear she'd been thoroughly and completely humbled. As the cameras prepared to cut to commercial, the audience began to applaud. But they weren't applauding both guests equally. The ovation was clearly for Angelina, who had delivered a masterclass in grace under pressure while exposing the fundamental emptiness of performative activism. Meghan sat there, her perfectly planned appearance having backfired spectacularly, while Angelina acknowledged the applause with the same quiet dignity she'd maintained throughout the entire devastating exchange. In less than 30 minutes, one of Hollywood's most respected figures had completely dismantled one of the world's most calculated self-promoters, all while never raising her voice or abandoning her principles. It was a moment that would be replayed countless times, analyzed endlessly, and remembered as the day authentic service triumphed over manufactured victimhood on live television. So what did you think of this incredible display of grace under pressure? Did Angelina Jolie handle this situation perfectly, or should she have been more diplomatic? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories that reveal what really happens when the cameras are rolling.